against Donald Trump back in 2017. Jon, really great to have you. You're looking at this from a historical lens. If this turns out to be true, do you think there's any choice that Republicans will have but to vote for impeachment?
Well, I don't think there's any choice in terms of proceeding with impeachment. And if the evidence is what it appears to be, I think in good conscience, Republicans who are following their and Democrats who are following their constitutional duty and the precedents of impeachment themselves, which has the virtue of being bipartisan. Both Nixon and President Clinton were impeached on the floor. Well, President Nixon resigned first, but he would have been. President Clinton was impeached for obstruction of justice, for suborning perjury, for attempting to shape stories, to keep facts from Congress, from the public. And ultimately, you hear an argument a lot from Republicans, I'm sure you hear it more than I do, which is impeachment is not the way to go because that would overturn an election. That's a political interpretation of what is also a constitutional and legal procedure here, which is if, in fact, the President of the United States has committed what we have found in our system to be a high crime or misdemeanor, and we have evidence, I don't see how one would argue not proceeding and ultimately not voting for that possibility.
Are you saying even though high crimes and misdemeanors hasn't been explicitly laid out in the Constitution, there have been two modern-day Congresses who have decided that high crimes and misdemeanors does equal, at the very least, obstruction?
Absolutely. It was the House Judiciary Committee under Peter Rodino in 1974, and it was the House itself in 1998.
Under
they
Gingrich.
Both proceeded on these grounds to impeach presidents for obstruction of justice. And if this is prima facie obstruction of justice, I don't really see what the argument is.
Congressman, you introduced articles of impeachment already against the president. Not a lot of your Democratic colleagues supported you in that move last year. What do you see happening among your Democratic colleagues the more news like this comes out?
Well, we had 17 co-sponsors, and that was, considering the pressures we had to not come out for it, was, I think, pretty good. I've had people come up to me and ask me about putting them in again. But I do think we have a majority, so we have the power of investigations and oversight. We'll have the opportunity to bring to light some of the issues concerning obstruction, concerning emoluments violations, concerning repressing the free press and the attacks on the judiciary, and bring those facts out. To get a conviction, which is the most important thing, you need to have Republican senators come across. And to get them to change their position, you've got to have their Republican base change their tune. So you've got to have some things like obstruction that is clear and present, and we can bring it out in hearings, and I think we need to do that.
What happens if the Republican base doesn't care?
Well, if they don't, then Trump will probably continue on and finish his term, and I think that's all he's looking at right now. I think he's given up on the idea of being reelected. He's hunkered down
I
to
don't know
keeping
about that.
his
Their
base.
campaign keeps sending out emails talking about new staff hires.
Well, they may be doing it to raise money and spend it at Trump hotels. This is a very unusual man in presidency. He is hunkered down to keeping his base, to keep the Senate Republicans on his team. He foresees, I think, impeachment coming because he knows and Mueller knows what he did. And that scares the heck out of Trump, because I think that the worst things people expect are probably the least things people will realize. You know, some famous professor said that this was like the Titanic coming at the iceberg. And I've seen that as I've sat in Congress. That's why I filed my resolution in 2017, because it's obviously the iceberg is there, and Trump is the Titanic.
Jon, you're not that professor, but you are a historian, and you've studied presidents going back a long time. Put this moment into perspective for us.
It's unprecedented in the sense that having a president who has explicitly been this unconventional, who sought power and has executed it in this way that has had no regard for norms, who has clearly put himself overtly above the law. At least Nixon only did it on his tapes privately. Where I think we are is at a really interesting inflection point, not just for the Congress, but for the people themselves. You ask about the Republican base. It's an essential question. But one of the things, and to answer it, the question we have to figure out is, in fact, are we loyal to, are we still invested in the 242-year experiment in a constitutional system that's not perfect, that explicitly is about trying just to make us more perfect? Are we dedicated to that beyond our partisan tribal loyalties? And it takes a long time for this to happen. I've argued this for a long time. Watergate took 25, 26 months. Joe McCarthy reigned in the country for 4 years. You know, this is Andrew Johnson tried to undo the verdict of the Civil War and survived this very process. Where I think we are is, I think people have to look and say, and I don't mean to sound sentimental about it, but I think this has the virtue of being true. You have to decide, is the system more important than the passions of a particular partisan moment? Is the system itself durable? Is it something we believe in? And if so, then it may require throwing over the flavor of the era, which is Donald Trump.
You know, but you're asking people to look forward and to care more about the future than the present moment, maybe. And I think if we've learned one thing, we're not so good at doing that. Look at how we've addressed climate change. I mean, it's just one example of not thinking about the future.
That's exactly right. And what I would say to conservative friends, and I live in Congressman Cohen's state, so I only have conservative friends in Tennessee, it is that the original intent of the American experiment, which was a noble and really remarkable and revolutionary insight, was that reason has to have a chance against passion in the arena. You're exactly right. Passion is the dominant human force. It's what Thomas Hobbes meant when he talked about a war of all against all. Donald Trump is a Hobbesian figure. He believes in perpetual conflict. America was supposed to create a system in which we would give our reason, we'd give our better angels a chance in this arena of a state of nature. And I think that it is a remarkable moment. It will be a huge reach, but that's what we're supposed to do.
Not to give in to the passions of man. Jon Meacham, Jon, thank you so much. Congressman Steve Cohen, thank you as well. We have a little bit of breaking news from the White House. Oh, I'm sorry. We have to. There's some breaking news. I'm sorry. President Trump has met